So what's up, Tim and Terrence Maiden, here at the HiggTalks podcast. Man, I'm excited to have you two here. Couple TCU alums, guys I've known for a few years, great guys. There's a trend in this podcast. I know everyone that's on it, so haven't really had any strangers yet. At some point, we probably will. But yeah, how are y'all today?
Doing good. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
For sure. So, as always, we kind of start with just like background. So tell everybody maybe where you grew up, kind of a little bit about just where'd you grow up, where'd you go to school, what are you into right now, and then we'll kind of start the conversation.
Yeah, so we're products of Oak Cliff, Dallas.
Nice.
Born and raised. Attended David W. Carter High School in Oak Cliff, and then was fortunate enough to earn athletic scholarships to play for the Frogs, TCU.
Go Frogs.
And had a great experience kind of transitioning from the inner city, then going to, a college campus, an affluent college campus like TCU. Played ball there, lettered all 4 years. I finished my undergrad and graduate studies from TCU and then entered into the banking field. And so I've been doing commercial lending for the last 20 plus years. Hard to believe, I'm getting old. But really been rewarding. I'm involved in Dallas for us lending. Took on a new role to help bring, capital and resources to sometime neglected communities. So
awesome.
Proud to take some leadership there.
What bank?
So I'm with Simmons Bank.
Okay.
When I first started out, I started at Frost Bank in Fort Worth. Knew a couple of gentlemen there that was connected with TCU, and really afforded me an opportunity to get into the banking world, and really provided me with mentorship and some development, and took those skills, went back to Dallas. I always had a desire to go back to home, to be a commercial lender and advisor to business owners, entrepreneurs, and so it's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's been a good experience for me.
That's awesome.
Yep.
What about you, Terrence? After school?
Yeah. I went into commercial real estate, and so Tim chose the banking route. For me, I didn't know a lot about commercial real estate, honestly. So a big TCU alumni, Dale Ladner, actually introduced me to the business, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
It was very difficult starting out, but I've learned a lot. I started out at Omni Group, which is ran by Dale, and then I went over to Woodmont. Stephen Kozlik is the principal there, and that's sort of where I cut my teeth.
Cool.
in the business. I was there for about 5 or 6 years, doing primarily project leasing.
Okay.
And then ultimately got on the development side while at Woodmont.
Nice.
And then did a short stint on the corporate real estate side. I was the VP of development at Panera Bread, director of real estate at Panda, and then got back on the development side. And so that's sort of what I've been doing the last 10 to 12 years, is really focusing on sort of urban revitalization projects. So
nice.
we're under construction with a major mall redo in Dallas, the old Redbird Mall. We're pretty close on a mall in Houston, sort of an impact development project there too.
That's sweet.
So yeah, it's exciting.
That's awesome. Well, you're both obviously really smart guys. So let's back up to then, growing up, home life, like was school and, learning, was that just like part of your family's culture? Was that something that like your parents really impressed upon you? Were you awesome students just all the time growing up? Or is that something that just kind of developed later? Talk to me a little bit about like kind of early life growing up. What was that like?
Yeah.
I guess for us, we were really fortunate, Carter. We, the community that we grew up in, was very close-knit. Our teachers was really committed and devoted to the development of their students. They would actually come to your parents' house, they would actually ring the doorbell. And so it required us to be focused and be accountable. And it was emphasized over and over again. And when I reflect back over some of the people that really took a time for as coaches, teachers, you know, they would make us recite poems and, you know, do things unconventional, just to develop character and, you know, this desire to expect more. And so it was tough. You know, once you go to TCU and you see the amount of wealth there,
right.
We thought we was doing pretty good. Did we recognize? Not quite. So, but far as the love, the community, it was a very rewarding and I guess impactful experience for us.
Yeah. And that leads in well to then like TCU, once you get there, so you have obviously really great close-knit community when you're in, you know, early school, high school, all that stuff. Was that kind of a shock at TCU? Did you have that same level of support, or what was that transition like?
It was a difficult transition. I think the other thing for us, Oak Cliff, especially the area we grew up in, was predominantly African American, and so our sort of world was revolved around the people that you interact with on a regular basis. So from church to school to extracurricular activities, it was all people that looked like me. And so coming to TCU was a cultural shock. And so I think trying to find my way, in a different environment was very challenging.
Sure.
I think football was the common thread because it's something that we've done our whole lives, and so we invested a lot of our time and devotion to just football. I struggled to make friends at TCU. I think a lot of it was probably my own insecurities. Not willing to go outside of my comfort zone to meet people. That's one big regret. I think TCU in itself is a great institution, but it wasn't very diverse.
Right.
And so the people that were black were athletes.
Yeah.
And so we're in our own little world. Fortunately for us, we played as a fraternity our freshman year.
Right.
And so that allowed us to begin to meet other people outside of the sort of the TCU world too. But the thing that I probably appreciated most is that over time, right, TCU kind of built a certain level of confidence where I could relate to the black community. I can relate to athletes from different backgrounds. I can relate to the white people, so it's sort of this melting pot, for me personally, that helped me out, especially within my career.
Yeah, it's awesome. Tim, did you have some of the same struggles with making friends?
I would say it was an adjustment, as Terrance stated. I think for its academic requirements, being self-disciplined, realizing you didn't have the comfort of your parents or parental support and guidance. It was really a personal commitment that you had to make with yourself. You're going to be disciplined to go to class, or you're going to be disciplined to do the study hours in order to progress and do well and excel in school. And like any other student athlete going into that environment, it was difficult to adjust. I never would have imagined going to TCU when I signed that letter of intent that I would have 2 degrees coming out.
Yeah.
Especially looking at the first couple of semesters, I thought this is going downhill pretty quick. But from a social standpoint, we had a football podcast that and you would think that, since we departed from TCU like 20 years ago, there'll be some progress. And I think the university have become very intentional for us increasing their diversity. But I think some of the student athletes still feel that alienation sometimes from the general student population. So, and we experienced that too. We wasn't immune from that. But I think, like Terrance mentioned before, I wish I would have had a little bit more initiative to kind of step outside of just being a student athlete,
right,
and getting involved in the social community of the university. So But yeah, absolutely.
So it's super interesting, me knowing y'all on the other side of that. Like, I would never say that y'all are, slow to make community. If anything, y'all are like connectors of community. And so what do you think changed that? What started to change that to where maybe you felt more comfortable, or to where you said, all right, now I'm going to be a connector? Was it just that you felt that when you're there? What was it?
Time, and taking risk, especially professionally.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned earlier, I really struggled when I got into the business world too. And it was certain things I just didn't know. Right. And it's funny now, but I mean, I would come to work with like these big slacks on with the real colorful shirts, and everybody in the office is looking. I'm the only black guy there, right? Everybody looking at me like, what does this dude have on? I'm surprised I can be sitting in this seat because there are so many people sitting in this seat with me that poured into me.
Yeah.
Like, for an example, Pastor Horton is a guy that has a church here, but he opened a resale shop, like where he'll go get clothes from estate sales.
Yeah.
And so he's like, man, you're in business now, you got to get a suit.
Yeah.
And so he basically gave us 20 suits from estate sales.
Wow.
But I looked decent,
nice suit.
A nice suit. My first suit, business suit, it was a hand-me-down, but at least I can walk into the office with a little bit more confidence, and so I think taking that step. The other thing too was being willing to put in the extra hours. So I realized that in order for me to be successful, I can't get to work at 8 and leave at 5. So I showed up at 5:36 every day and would leave at like 8. Putting in the extra work so I can become more knowledgeable, because knowledge builds confidence, and you feel more confident talking to other people. And so as a result of that, it enabled me to network, and I can walk in a room and be with my head up high, knowing that I'm not really what the typical commercial real estate guy looked, but I was confident in myself.
Do you think, growing up as young black men, did you feel like I have to work harder, I have to put in more hours because I look different than most people in my industry, or do you think it was more of just like hey, I learned this through my life and through my community, and I'm just gonna work hard?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, Carter. I think the reality is there are certain biases, right, that people carry with them, whether fairly or unfairly. It's a reality, right? And I do think I was sharing with, had to do a convocation or a baccalaureate service for a school in Dallas. And I shared with them how I got into banking. So my degree, discipline at TCU, was sociology. I just had a minor in business.
Really?
Yeah, and the requirement for being in this banking program for Frost was at least a finance degree or accounting, right?
Yeah.
So I went on the first interview, and they was having a selection process for like 4 people from the area to represent the bank for this market. And I didn't get accepted, so I was devastated. So I ended up calling the HR person, who was very friendly. Her name was Kathy Broom. She's retired. And I said, could I have done something differently?
Yeah.
She said, no, everything went well. I was very pleased with you. She said, I would say, not having all the credit and accounting and finance background hurt. So I said, is there anything, can I just go through the credit analyst program, right? So, of course, I'm not going to make a whole lot. It'll be an hourly kind of deal. Cool. So I would get there in the morning before the president of the bank would arrive. And I would wait until the very end, because he had a long day. When he's leaving, we'll walk out together. A gentleman named Steve Bowma, and did it all the time. He just saw me just continually working and developing. And even though I didn't have the qualifications, you see what I'm saying, just the commitment and the desire, and just demonstrating that I really wanted this.
Yeah.
Same thing with football. People get to observe that this guy, because of his discipline, his tenacity, he'll be successful. So that's how I landed in that field. So, yeah.
Man, there's two things there that, I think it's probably normal for y'all. That's just not like ordinary. The first one is both of you having that fortuitousness to say like, all right, I'm just going to put in more time and I'm going to like make that commitment to do it. And then even just the humbleness to call back and ask the question of like, could I have done anything differently? A lot of people just, all right, that door's closed, then move on to the next thing. Like, and I'm kind of pushing on the same issue. Like, where do y'all think that comes from in y'all? Like, you both have, so I'll tell you, we just did a research on some of our most successful producers, and literally the only real indicator behind success is like grit and work hard. Like, like you can have every personality trait in the world, but if you don't have grit and you don't work hard, then it really doesn't matter. So like, I mean, how do you think what makes y'all so unique in that regard? It's like,
well, from a foundation standpoint, I think seeing my father worked really hard. Like he'd be at work and leave the house.
What did he do?
He was at the post office. He just sort of worked as he started out as sort of like a postman, and then he worked his way up to where he was sort of like the regional manager at the post office. But he would get up around 4 a.m. and be out the door, and then he'll get off late, and then he invests a lot in our family. But I think so hard work is one that we saw from my dad and my grandfather. My grandfather was a business owner in Shreveport, and so I think that sort of work ethic was sort of built in us. And I think the other thing too is college taught a lot of sort of foundational things that, when Stephen Kozlik said, I want you to join Woodmont, it wasn't because of my education. It was really because I was a football player. And, the stuff that people take for granted, like being on time, being disciplined, being competitive, all those different things sort of gel together. And some people get it and some people don't. I always wonder why some athletes really struggle after football to get, back, either get into a career or get back acclimated to just being a regular person. And I think for us, I say for me personally, I think that sense of balance was great because football was important, but it wasn't everything, right? Faith was important for our family, so that sense of, purpose and balance made it a lot easier to have that level of focus going forward.
Right.
So it's like I'm going to have to put in work if I'm playing in the NFL. I'm going to have to put in work if I'm going to do commercial real estate. I'm going to have to put in work if I'm going to be a banker. It all requires work.
Right. Right.
So that's the deal.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I mean, to add to Terrance, I wasn't like this prominent athlete, right? Yeah. Just fundamentally, in my mind, and everything that, so when I look at like how my life is threaded together, when I was in high school, I didn't start until my senior year, and so in everything I had to do, I felt like I had to compete harder to get there. So it kind of built this perseverance inside of me to say, hey, if I'm dedicated, if I channel all this energy to a common goal, and put all my devotion and time to it, you'll get success. It's like planting seeds when you make sacrifices. I was listening, you raised a good point. I was listening to a podcast this morning, Maxwell Leadership Podcast, talked about the same thing, that I rather promote people, he said, rather promote people that have self-motivation and the grit. Because once they get elevated, they're going to influence everybody else around them. That same kind of, I guess, activity.
Yep.
And sometimes you can promote people just based on, hey, they've been there a long time, or they may be a little bit more talented, but they really don't have self-motivation, and they can bring down the morale. So, finding people, and I think us being together, help, being with your because we were highly competitive against each other, and we criticized each other. So we was really hard on each other, and still is to a certain degree, but not as much. But I think it does kind of propel you, and you see someone else making the sacrifices and it kind of self motivates you to say, let me do the same thing and put in that time.
Yeah, and I think that I can speak to like my own athletic life, that actually those times of failure and having to work harder, not being the most gifted athlete in the world, like certainly had an influence on who I am today. Like I think in anyone's life, I think most successful people you see, there's some type of failure in there. There's some sort of barrier that they figured out that, all right, I'm just gonna have to work harder. I'm just gonna have to commit. I'm just gonna have to keep doing it. And so I think it's cool just kind of how both of you found that, individually and together. Yeah. And so you're doing those things. You're in your offices. You're both, putting in extra time. Like, so then how did you both go to that next step? Was it somebody just gave you a hand up? Was it you kind of, as you learned, you made some decisions that really set you apart? Like, what was that next thing that, like, okay, I got my foot in the door. I'm busting my butt. So now how did I get that next step for each of you?
For me, it's just one of those weird things. So it's the old saying, life is filled with swift transitions. It's really true. Like, you work hard, right, and then there's a swift transition to that next level. And I have those moments where it's just so embedded in my mind about when to take that next step, and when was the time. And it just felt, for me, it was a still small voice say, like, now, like, move, right. And so from every sort of job, launching my own company, everything was that still small voice saying it. But when I made it, it was like swift, but you work really hard where you are. I believe in the importance of blooming where you planted. Like, if someone takes a chance on you, put in all the work you can, look for ways that you can develop and grow and increase your capacity. And then at the right time, you can elevate and go to that next level in your career. Yeah. Man, I think, and before we get to your part, man, that in and of itself is a skill set, and obviously there's a lot of like spiritual and biblical undertones to some of those decisions that you make and how you make them, and that's a big part of both of your lives, obviously, is faith. But the ability to identify opportunities, choose when it's the right one, when it's the wrong one, and then again also just that like stick-to-itiveness to say, like, all right, this is where I am today, and I'm going to be fully invested. I met with a younger producer today that was asking advice, and I said, man, you have to decide if you're all the way in on this or not. Because if you come to the office half committed, everybody sees that half commitment. And now you're not going to get any help from anybody, because no one wants to invest in somebody that's not invested themselves. And so, like, that skill set and ability to identify the right opportunity at the right time is again, everybody doesn't have that. Everybody doesn't get that, Yeah. I think the biggest thing too is it's an uncomfortable feeling. So anytime I start feeling uncomfortable, it's almost like a cocoon with a butterfly. Like, if I feel like I'm in a place where I'm not growing, or I feel like people are not investing in me, or I'm not bringing as much value, I feel like a shifting is happening, right? And so I try to be really cognitive of that. I have one thing that was funny to me was I remember I was really feeling hard times, and I was receiving an award, like a major award, and had an eviction notice on my door at my apartment. Wow. And I remember, but I felt like I'm in the right space. And it was sort of that wrestling, right? Hey, burn the midnight oil. But then you just have this glimpse of where you want to be, and it keeps you going, but then at the right time, things shift. And so life has a very interesting way of like leading you right where you need to go if you can stay in the race. Dude, when I was coaching, I'll never forget this, similar to your story. I'm at Texas State. I'm the youngest Division I position coach in the nation. Everyone's patting me on the back. CBS Sports put out a deal every year that was the salaries of every public university coach in college football from top to bottom.
I was dead last. I saw the thing, and I was making, whatever I was making, $27,000 or something a year. And I'm dead last in the nation. And I remember that was one of those moments for me. Outside of prayer and consideration, everybody's telling me how awesome I'm doing. I see this list, and I'm like, man, I see my buddies working half as hard as me,
right,
and they're doing this. And that was one of the first things that started getting in my head about, man, maybe if I apply this same work ethic to something else, then maybe that's the time that I should make a change. And I started wondering what that change was going to be, and ended up where I am now. So I think that's super intuitive of you, helpful to remind people like that are listening that sometimes what it takes is just sticking with it, and having that ability to look around and say, where else can I be helpful here? That's honestly at Higginbotham, some of my biggest successes have just been looking up and being like, we need this, so I'm just going to start doing it. I'm not going to ask for permission to do it. I'm just going to start doing it. And then creating value there to where the company starts to see like, man, they just picked that up, Terrance just picked that thing up. So maybe we should just give him that title. So what about you, Tim? I mean, so obviously you're walking in and out with this CEO, or you're beating the CEO there, or the boss.
I think what's critically important is access. I think we was fortunate to gain access, and it provides exposure. Yeah. And whether we talk about TCU, whether we talk about in the boardroom, I'm a very observant person. So, I would look at people that I viewed as someone I wanted to emulate and model. And a few people come to mind. And I think what I was sharing again this past weekend with some students is, don't think college is the end of your learning. Terrance and I, we very reflective individuals. We still read books. I'm still trying to hone my skills. And you can never cease to grow. And like you said, finding opportunities of how can I add value to an organization. And sometimes we limit ourselves to, hey, I'm confined to this position. And I never wanted to put myself, this is my role, right? I want to figure out how can I get to the very top. And having conversations with like CEOs and just taking time out to figure out what did they do, what are things that they're implementing in their lives, these disciplines. Terrance and I, we're still big on trying to work out and stay active. Those things help with your mental psyche of dealing with stress that comes along with, being in certain positions and roles. So it's just gaining access and continued self-development. I think is critically important. So
for sure. Yeah. As you've now been successful, do you continue to try to be that person that, like, I'm still not afraid to get in the weeds, I'm not afraid to do the roles that maybe aren't in my department or that are above me? Do y'all try to do that? I mean, or below me, I mean? You know what I mean?
You have to. Yeah. I think it keeps you humble. It keeps you grounded. It also is a good reminder of never to forget where you came from. And so a part of that is our community giving and our willingness to give back to the community that has given so much to us. And we are equally passionate about sort of our community service as we are our careers. And so that sense of balance, again, I think helps us to be a lot more relatable with people, right? And people are when you're successful, you become a role model, but people are looking, and people are seeing how you invest your money and your time and your talent. And so if you could do it in a way where it's meaningful, right, and purposeful, I think it inspires people, right? Yeah. And you don't do it just for that. I mean, we give back because that's something that's been so ingrained in us from our childhood on up, and so it's just a part of the fabric of who we are. But I think it's been critical in our growth because people rally behind people that seem like they're just really honest, and they're trustworthy. They're real. All those things and characters are really important.
Yeah. in sales, I think authenticity is, to me, the number one thing. When people ask me like, well, how do you do sales? I'm like, you don't ever have to talk yourself out of the truth. So, be inquisitive, try to find like ways that you can support and help people, relate to people, just be honest. Like, I don't think it's really honestly that difficult. So, in that same vein of just how you two are super authentic to like who you are and your upbringing. And so what point did you start saying, hey, we're already philanthropic, like let's form an organization, like the Two Wins Foundation? I mean, how did y'all, what was the point where y'all said, all right, it's time for us to really formalize this?
Well, I think Carter, you're right on it. And it's very fundamental and foundational. What we ended up doing, it was birthed in the living room of our parents' household.
Oh, cool.
We wanted to kind of showcase the possibility of education and then getting connected to your profession quickly, right? We didn't have that. I think my dad was a strong man of high integrity, work ethics, but he didn't go off to a 4-year college. He wasn't in the business circuit, if you will. That's something we had to learn on our own. And even with his limitations, he was very supportive of us taking our collective experience from TCU and then being in the inner city and see how we can leverage that to kind of uplift the next generation. And so that was really the premise behind starting the foundation, Two Wins. We became a little bit more intentional towards the end cycle as we began to expand our reach. And that intentionality came from really identifying, more at-risk students, particularly males of color, because, if you look at the statistics for as higher education, there's the lowest population of, college students. And then the attrition rate where they start and they fall out. So we wanted to address or backfill that gap, if you will. So we launched a program called Elevate, where we take in high school students, take them to a college campus so they can get the college experience, bring in influencers, business leaders to expose about how did they get started, because everybody's journey is different. And I think if people can witness that, hey, it's not really where you start, right? It's kind of like the direction you're going. And if you can focus on where you're going, then what's behind you becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
And so what we try to do is just say, hey, this was our path, create your own, but it's one for you.
Yeah.
And so we've been really motivated by the level of success of these programs.
That's awesome.
Yeah. The only thing I would add to that is, for me, when we launched Two Wins, I was at a place of sort of frustration with the church, honestly. I felt like in ministry, I felt like the church was more inward focused instead of outward focused. And a part of Two Wins was to be how can we display care and a heart for a community financially.
Yeah. And
so originally the vision was just to be donors to major organizations that were already doing the work. And it just evolved over time. A lot of people, one of the number one questions I get, how do y'all get started with y'all nonprofit, and how were you able to sort of navigate through, it's been 15 years plus that we've been doing this work. And it hasn't been easy work, but I think it's being intentional. It's been willing to make changes, making sure what you're doing is relevant, that it's impactful. And so we've made adjustments as we, been on this journey. And I feel like right now we're in a good space, but, we sort of transitioned from Two Wins to the Maiden Foundation, because I think to whom much is given, as much is required. So this next level of impact, I think it's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
I think as more doors and opportunities open, so should our impact grow.
Well, that's awesome. So speak a little bit more about Elevate. Like what, you talked about, bringing in, influencers and leaders, and what are some like the practical, tactical things that you're teaching these young men?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing that's interesting is that the program has really grown. Like it started out, I mean, we said, okay, we're going to be very conservative. We're just going to take in 30 guys the first summer. And it went well, but we spend 1 week with these guys, and we're teaching them everything from how to tie a tie to a proper dinner etiquette, how to network, how to go shake hands. These guys come in not knowing each other, not being in that sort of business environment, and we have some honest conversations. I mean, probably the most impactful component about it is the mental health side. Also, like the exposure and with some of the speakers that come in. It's been really encouraging. The last time we did it, we had over 300 young men to apply.
Wow.
And so it shows the need for it.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it shows. Yeah, it
Is
shows.
that all in Dallas?
All in Dallas. Wow. We had guys traveling from different states to come.
Wow.
And
how do people know about it? How are they learning?
It's through word of mouth. Like it's sort of grown organically.
Dude,
and
that's
so,
crazy. 300 kids.
The next evolution of Elevate ideally is to see how we can make it even more like impactful. So we're trying to do like a big male conference where we can have phenomenal speakers from across the country to come in and pour into these guys. But the one thing I would say is just organically, these guys have built sort of a fraternity with each other, and they become friends, and
cool.
they lean on each other, and we get countless emails each summer, like, hey, just checking in, where we can get an internship. So it's been been real refreshing.
Man, send those kids here. Man, we're always looking for good interns, and that's actually a big push that we've made is to how do we expand our reach? How do we diversify our reach? Actually, in this last year is the first year that we're recruiting at HBCUs for the first time.
That's awesome.
So we've really made some pushes here with the work of our culture committee and our HR department. And so, man, send those people here. We actually have 20 interns that are here right now, which is
wow.
Pretty cool.
So those are folks taking up all the parking.
That's right. So, man, that's so cool. So what, like, right now are y'all most excited about in your lives, whether it be career, personal, the social side? Like, what gets you up every day right now? What makes you excited?
I'm really excited. 2 of my kids are in college, just to see their growth and looking for internships and stuff like that.
That's cool.
So it's on the personal side. I think
2 wins.
Yeah, 2 wins. That's right. Almost, I can see the home stretch, But the other thing too is I think really grateful for the journey. Sometimes people see where you're at right now and they don't know the process to get there. I think now, hopefully, hopefully considered that as I begin to expand, there are some things that I'm looking to do personally in my career that to create even deeper impact.
Yeah.
I realize that, our community is still a social, economic divide there. I think that one of the things that we really don't talk about that we should more is that we've been really focused on trying to bridge that gap, if you will. We had a program or an event about a month ago called Refresh that was through the Maiden Foundation, really identifying young professionals from different cultures and background and understanding there's a common goal, a common vision to bring unity to the community. And even though someone's journey or life experience is different from yours, you still can learn from them. And it's all about perspective. I'm learning more now to, instead of sitting on the opposite side, maybe sit on the same side of the table as an individual to see how they're looking at things. And if you can't really lead effectively until you kind of humble yourself to do that, because you have this, just innate thought to say, the way I look at it is the right way.
Yeah, some inherent bias there.
Yeah, inherited. And so I think the more you can become desensitized to your life experiences, and becomes, empathetic to other people, then you can really create change. And I think our culture and society is moving that direction. And that's my goal. I really want to be a thought leader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not about a role in the position, just figuring out how can I create change for other people.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
Yeah, echoing a lot what Tim said. The one thing is, I felt like, life has different phases, right? And so, leaving out of college, I found my purpose, right? So I found my purpose in my career. I've been on this journey. I've been sort of trying to find my way. And then in this season, I want to find my voice. I want to not only do work that's meaningful to me personally, but how can I amplify that work to be a voice for the voiceless? So how can my work speak for an entire community?
Yeah.
And so with some of the development projects that our company is focused on, how can we creatively tell a story and move a nation, really, from sort of this racial divide, sort of the inequities that are prevalent in Black and brown communities. How can we be able to bridge that divide, access to health care, access to grocery stores, to jobs, housing, and solve needs? And so, that's my hope. Like in my journey right now, that's sort of what I've been focusing on. I'm authoring a book right now to help tell a story. I think some of the projects that our company is endeavoring to take on speaks to that too.
Cool.
And so that's what I'm most excited about.
That's awesome. The something that y'all said there as we get close to the end of this that kind of resonated with me in terms of like even the industry that I'm in is, when you talk about like exposure, whether that be like majority culture, just kind of knowing, or it be affluent culture, just kind of knowing, like, when we talk about insurance, for example, one of the things we often talk about in here is that people think insurance and they think like State Farm salesman or something. But we talk about, like, at our company, you could be in finance, you could be an accountant, you could be in IT, you could be, there's all these jobs that unless you grow up maybe in an affluent community where you've seen other people with those jobs, you don't even know that job exists at our company. And so part of what we've seen in our role is that we have to do a better job of educating people. So like with our interns that come in now, we're like, you're not in one department, you're going to rotate departments the whole time you're here. Very smart. So that you can get some exposure to, there's a lot of different jobs here. And so you may say like, well, I'm not a salesman. Great. We don't only need salesmen, we need a lot of other things to keep this machine going. And so when you look at, maybe it's the insurance, maybe it's financial services, what do you see that, maybe businesses could be doing differently to create more of that exposure, to allow more of the opportunities like you're both speaking to?
I can speak to, financial services and insurance. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. You're providing needs, right? I think the more you can highlight the benefits of, what you're selling and promoting, when I look at insurance, it's something you can't see, but you need, right? So insurance, you're covered, right? Yeah. So now, and it become necessary when there's a crisis, right? And so people don't understand the benefit of it. You can sleep better when you have insurance. It's give you comfort and peace. So I think just promoting some of those benefits, I think it's critically important. I think certain communities, sometimes for its affordability, they don't understand the importance of it, whether it's health, whether it's property, whether it's life insurance. These are the conversations we try to have all the time because it puts them in a worse position when they don't have
Right,
it, right?
right.
And so I think it's just the continual education,
Mm-hmm.
the value of it is important as well.
Yeah, and that touches not only, so obviously there's the how do we create more exposure for communities to understand what jobs exist in these markets, and then also some of that is, like in my upbringing, I grew up in Dallas Highland Park with a wealthy family. Like there was a lot of financial knowledge that I just gained through watching. I just inherently kind of knew, and so like I find myself in a role now where I'm enrolling a company with a lot of low-income individuals. A lot of the conversations I'm having are about, simple risk mitigation, about like how much do you have in savings? If this happened, how would you handle that? I don't want you to be insurance poor. Don't enroll in these things. These things aren't going to help you, but this one is important, And so I see my job as I have a real responsibility to help advise people and make good decisions about their financial world. And obviously everybody's got different risk management, but yeah. What about you, Terrance? Where do you feel like, and you don't have to just talk about insurance or just financial services, maybe it's in the real estate world. How could more exposure be created, or what do you see as like a need or education? Or
what I'm discovering is that the workforce is so different now, and it's changing even more, post-COVID, right? And the things that young talent is looking for is much different. So I'm talking more so internally, with different organizations. I think the leadership team has to be very engaging. People want to work in an environment where there's culture there, where there's creativity, where their voice matters. All those things are, very important to attract, talent and to keep them there. I think what you all are doing is very creative with the podcast, thinking of things outside the box, really keeps your team enthusiastic about where you're going as a company. Right. Externally, being willing to take risk. Like, the one question I ask my team each Monday is like, what is it that we don't see? Like, it's always what's obvious, your day-to-day work. Yeah. What can you be focused on that could be a game changer,
right.
But it's outside the box,
right?
Because sometimes you just operate in your own little world, and you don't take the time out to just take a breath and just like take a real good peripheral view
right.
of what's happening not only within your industry but within society, and how can you address that need.
Yeah, that's really good. We have a saying, and I've stolen it from my church, is last 10%. So like when you're in a meeting, typically people say 90% of what they're thinking, and they kind of hold back 10% of their thought because they're like, I'm not sure how this is going to get received or whatever. So at the end of my meetings, I always try to ask, like, all right, last 10%. Somebody have something that you were thinking that you didn't want to say? Is there some idea you have that you're afraid of presenting? Like, let's present that. Let's talk about the last 10%. Good. All right, so, you've built, successful businesses individually. You've built a nonprofit foundation that's done well, Elevate Academy, and everything that's come from that. Let's say that I'm a young businessman or woman. What's your advice to, like, where do I start? Like, what do I do first? What would you tell somebody?
Well, I guess I deal with it day in and day out. I would say have a plan. I think, and business plan is good for a banker or a lender or someone, an investor, but it's really more beneficial to you. Kind of figure out counting the costs, the sacrifice required.
Yeah.
I think figuring out what are some of the opportunities, some of the threats, the SWOT analysis.
Yeah.
We all been through business school and understand that. But I do think it's critically important in having businesses that done well and some that didn't, because, majority of the business that you launch, it fails. And I like what you talked about. It's nothing wrong with failing, right? It's learning from those events in your life. And so I would tell you, just have the tenacity, try to be as resourceful as possible. There's a lot of banks, bankers, nonprofits, community development corps that's there to support emerging companies and people that want to be an entrepreneur. A lot of resources out there. I say tap into that, but also when you go to them, have a vision casting or some kind of plans of how you think you're going to get there, and really kind of vet your product and see whatever you're trying to deliver, whether it's a service or a product, is it viable? Does it make sense? Is there a gap or void in the market for it? Or are you just competing with someone else? You know, so those are the things you got to consider.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Tim sort of hit on sort of the strategy around it. I think, you know, one thing that I encourage people to ask this question: does it hurt? Right? Are you the H is are you really, really hungry for it?
Yeah.
Right? Because some people say they want to do something, but they really don't want to do it. They just it looks cool.
Yeah.
You know, if you really want something, you'll do it for free.
Yeah.
Right. So the U is it urgent? Like, are you fulfilling a need that could be addressed right now? That you're going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace? And then the R is it relevant? Like, is what you wanting to do, is it really relevant to you and to your consumers or to your industry? And then lastly, you know, is it something that's tangible? Right? Is it something that if you put in forth all the effort and all these other things align, could it still happen?
Yeah.
But some people are going down this path that's sort of so far reaching that they get discouraged and they quit because they set unrealistic expectations and goals. So, you know, to keep those 4 things in mind, but I think everyone has their own path. Is sort of just like getting on that journey and going. Right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, like once the sexiness of the idea or like some certain industry that you want to get into, once that falls apart, that's where you see so many people they quit and they move on. And I try to remind people all the time, some of the, and all 3 of us honestly are in, you know, similar positions in this regards. Some of like the sexiest jobs in the world, some of the ones that pay the best aren't that sexy.
Right?
You know, it's just like some pretty tactical, practical work that has to happen.
Exactly.
You know, like you want to make a great living, maybe look at the things that everybody else doesn't want to do, because there's probably 1,000 people that'll do that job for free.
Like summertime HVAC guy, you'll pay him $500 real quick to get it fixed and going. So, you know, a lot of people forget the technical skills. They always feel like you got to be in a professional setting, but sometimes being an entrepreneur is just stepping out, being a plumber or having learned some other trade. It can do very well for yourself.
Man, in this insurance world, you see, you know, you work with so many different businesses. Dude, I'll never forget. One of my clients is a waste management company, and I remember when I first started working with them, I was like, "You make what? You make how much money doing that?" Like, and I'm like, "How did you build that?" He said, "Man, I just bought 1 truck for myself, and I just bought another one. And I started hiring employees." And I'm like, you know, there's so many of those jobs that I'm like, every job doesn't take a 4-year degree. It just takes some hungry, you know, and some, all right, I'm just going to do this task.
Right.
So anyways, in that same vein of entrepreneurs and young business people, you're both former athletes. We live in a really unique time of the NIL right now, to where you've got some young men and young women that have a lot of money getting thrown at them, or businesses approaching them about being involved in their practice. I think you've probably already had the opportunity to speak at some schools about this. What advice are y'all giving to people in this crazy NIL time that we live in?
I guess a couple of things. I think be selective about who you're inviting in your circle and who's advising you. I think a lot of athletes make that fatal decision when they go broke. A lot of times it's the wrong people in their ear, and managing your own expectation of yourself. Sometimes people throw money at you and then you feel like you're invincible, you're more than other people, and it can be a real turnoff. I think the last thing, I teach a course at UNT Dallas, ethics, and I don't care how successful you are. I don't care what level you get to. And in our course, we talk about it repeatedly. People that CEOs, and it's that danger of being in that position where now you're invincible, or you don't like dissent. You don't like people going against your voice. It's a very dangerous spot to be in.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. We see other people making the same mistakes over and over, and we kind of get in this tidal wave, and we find ourselves in that place. And so when you start attaining a lot of success, you have to manage your morality with money because both of them could be very dangerous and they kind of go against each other sometimes. So
yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, I would say just to, as an athlete, to trust the process. You know, like I think, like, the danger of the NIL is seeing people just make decisions based on just financial gain. And as Tim mentioned, I think that's just a dangerous decision because, I mean, you don't have any sort of loyalty to a university.
Right.
And athletics is very short-lived. And so don't burn the bridges that you have to eventually cross, you know, back over one day. And, you know, to do everything with integrity. Yeah. So that would be just my initial thoughts. You know, it complicates the whole athletic departments too, because now you know, one of the dangers that I'm hearing is that, you know, college coaches are not even recruiting high school players anymore. I mean, they're recruiting from other universities, you know. Right. And so I think athletics is just going to change so much on the collegiate level. And so I hope it doesn't take sort of the fun away from the game.
Right. And it complicates that decision too in terms of, you know, it used to be about, is this school a good fit for me? And do I like the coaching staff and facilities, that kind of stuff? Now, and a lot of the coaches that I talk to say that, man, now it's like just a money conversation, and the kid's missing out on the
education.
Is this coach even the right fit
even
for
the
me?
education.
Is the school the right fit for me?
Exactly.
I was going to say, I think if you're not careful, you're going to see a lot of people making a lot of sack. And, you know, you do it in athletics, at least you walk away with a degree, right? Now you're going to see people, I hate to say it, but university, they make a lot of money, and sometimes they exploit the players for that season, just for the wins and the championships. And then these students, once the money runs out, they don't have any education to fall back on. They don't have any investments. And then they pretty much dedicated and got all this stuff, the glamour of it, and then walked away with nothing.
Yeah, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think you hit on something really important. The real concern I have is more the school that the kids are coming from urban communities, right? So they don't have access to money. They think about their families back at home. I'm just going to take the best financial deal, and they lose sight of the education component of getting a degree, or even what college where they want to live at long term. Right. You know, and sort of building that sort of level of trust and loyalty around that university, and it could be a detriment to these athletes. You know, that's what gives me the most concern. Actually, I think some of the kids that are coming up from these, you know, level of poverty, or they're athletic, but then they don't have that sort of support system that's telling them the right thing to do, which could be really complicated.
I'm gonna add one thing to it. Think about it. The reasons that Terrance and I are sitting in this seat, it's not because of our athletic ability, because we had a strong TCU network that supported us. Right. And so when you start hopping from school to school, chasing dollars, you don't have that allegiance, and people don't feel it anyway. Right. And so they'll be more apt to help someone that was really committed to the university, may not have been a standout money person for the team, but love the university, because that individual that have influence within the community love the university.
Man, it's so strong. I used to tell my tight ends at Texas State all the time, in this college athletic scenario, somebody's going to get taken advantage of. Either the school is, because you do everything possible to, you know, use all those scholarship dollars to build every network opportunity you can, or you're going to get taken advantage of.
That's really good.
And they're going to bust up your body, and then they're going to put you out. Right. You know, and so, man, I when you're an athlete, you know, y'all know Marshall Newhouse. Marshall does a great job at this. We talk about it all the time. Like, people will take meetings with you now that they won't take them with you the day that you're done playing. So while you're playing, take every meeting you can. Like, ingrain yourself in that university, in that network, because, you know, the chancellor will do stuff for you. The teachers will do stuff for you.
Absolutely.
You know, because you're playing on Saturday.
But think about it, Carter. I'd leave with this. When we graduated from high school, we had 18 guys to get D1 scholarships.
Wow.
if I look back over and just reflect on the guys that's really connected to you can tell the guys that was connected to the program.
Right.
Because they afford you opportunities.
Yeah.
That sometimes maybe undeserving, but they'll take a chance on you because of it. Then you see other people that's more committed to the high school and stuff, and they're still in that same environment and kind of stuck. And so we see it repetitively. And I think we need to start talking about that more, especially with all these things that's happening now with the collegiate sports. So,
Okay, so we're talking about a lot of change in industries. When you look at the insurance industry, which is, I'm sure both of you have to deal with it in different regards for both of your jobs, what would you say, and maybe it's specifically to some of the underserved communities, what would you like to see change when it comes to insurance industry?
It's interesting. I think a lot of stuff now, we're in an inflationary kind of market, but affordability. I serve on a board for a nonprofit, and we're looking to bring in another executive director, and we're having these conversations about health benefits and insurance. And for smaller organizations and companies, how are insurance agency addressing those gaps? I think it's critically important. I deal with more small businesses as opposed to corporation, where they have, the resources and the capital to make sure everybody's fully covered and stuff like that. But what about this, entrepreneur that's starting out? Do y'all have products and plans and programs for those different sectors of the market? So,
man, and honestly, so this is kind of a tidbit on health insurance and the insurance industry in general. Insurance is actually one of the least diverse industries in the United States. It's over 90% white and mostly male. So that's something that we've seen in working with different organizations, and there's even some nonprofits that are working to try to bridge that gap. And I think that when you have a primarily white male run industry, then you end up inherently with some underserved communities because they don't have a partner that looks like them or that understands their background to help them bridge that gap, to say, this is what my demographic actually really needs.
Right. And I think it's important. I think it's a struggle in commercial real estate development, financial services. We need to bring more diversity to these different sectors of the market and industries, because if there's no representation, you fully don't understand some of the needs. And there's, I say needs, but there's really opportunities there. And it's just trying to be creative and how do you deliver those services and being intentional. And from financial services, all about trust. And insurance is one of those things too. A lot of times people have been victimized by, you said, over-insuring people and putting a lot of fees and premiums and deductibles, just make it really, really cumbersome for them to even want to pursue it. So, adaptability, exposure, I think all those things are really helpful. Yeah.
Cool. All right, one more time, where do we find both of y'all? Give us your handles for Instagram, Twitter, whatever.
So Maiden Foundation, maidenfoundation.com. I'm also on Instagram, TG Maiden, on Instagram, and on Facebook, Terrance Maiden.
Cool.
Same, Tim Maiden on Instagram, IG, and Facebook.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I
Thanks for
appreciate
having
you.
us.
Yeah, thanks.